We're down to the Sweet 16 in the college basketball tournament. The brackets are behind us. And look at that. There's NC State. There's Duke. There's Clemson. There's North Carolina. All from the Atlantic Coast Conference. 25% of the Sweet 16 from the ACC. By the way, there's only 4 schools with teams in the Sweet 16 in both the men's and women's field. Duke, NC State are 2 of them.
The stinky ACC.
Yep, we suck. Chip Patterson doesn't suck. He joins us, as always, on a Wednesday to talk about... We're going to get some Chipolytics in here, and so I look forward to that. How are you, sir?
Can I address that? I haven't gotten a chance to really weigh in on this,
okay.
But I think that looking at the ACC success in the NCAA tournament, both this year and in previous years... Mm-hmm. does not mean that the selection committee screwed up. I think ACC basketball fundamentally works in a single elimination tournament. I think that I've heard coaches talk about the style of ACC basketball, and I think it is more favorable. 2 things. I think number one is it is more favorable to bucket getters. I think that I've heard coaches talk about ACC basketball as being a little bit more free flowing. You don't have as many
except Virginia.
Except for Virginia, clearly. But you don't have. Well, that comes to point 2 in a second. You don't have as much of the Big East, Big 12, knockdown, drag out. Decided in the 50s, just street fights. I mean, just the brand of basketball in general in the ACC is not as physical. It is a more up and down game. And the NCAA tournament is not as physical as your regular season Tuesday night in the Big 12 or the Big East. Mm-hmm. It is, if it's a tight whistle, then your season could be on the line. I mean, it's just the game is officiated differently. And I think that the ACC playing a little bit more of a free-flowing game works for the NCAA tournament. The second thing is that the ACC, across its entire basketball conference, has tons of different styles. And that in you having to prepare for all these different teams, night in and night out, instead of having to play one brand of basketball, which is maybe more, knuckles in one conference, or maybe in the SEC, which is more like AAU. Seriously. Yeah. I mean, the reason why Kentucky and Auburn are flaming out is because they can't get to the line as much, and it's not as much of that just like up and down, no defense game. And so because of the diversity of styles and because of a general style that encourages more bucket getters, I think that's why Miami goes from a 5 seed to the Final Four. I think that's why North Carolina goes from an 8 seed to the Final Four. It's not that I blame the selection committee, but I think that the reason why we see ACC success in the NCAA tournament is because that's what the ACC does. Its style of basketball works in a single elimination, high stakes, high pressure tournament.
Chip Patterson is joining us here. I don't want to drag this particular part of the conversation on much further. I do want to address it. We had Joe Lunardi on today, and we talked to Jerry Palm. I mean, I'm friends with Jerry Palm. I've known Joe Lunardi for 30 years. I mean, I go back to the early 90s when I first started talking to Joe Lunardi. So I've got relationships with both guys. And I respect what they do. I mean, the fact that you could make a living out of doing this stuff. My point to Jerry, we have him on like every other week, as we get deep into the college basketball season, sometimes weekly. And my point to Joe was never to make more of a case for anybody from the ACC. Because in general, the teams that got in deserved it, albeit the eye test told us differently with Virginia.
Sure.
Like, if they were going to put an ACC team in that spot, and they didn't have to. If they put St. John's in over Virginia, there isn't a soul, including Tony Bennett, that would have gone, oh, man, we should have been in. Nobody.
I saw that man in Dayton. He was ready for the season to be over.
Absolutely. So, he's questioning his style now, right? Based on they have not had a lot of success in the tournament the last few years. So I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to be intellectually dishonest. Do I think Pitt with the eye test was a tournament team? 100%. That is a team that I think could have won twice. I think the same thing about Wake Forest. But their resumes did not demand that they really be strongly considered for one of those last spots. If Wake doesn't lose to Notre Dame and Georgia Tech, maybe. If Pitt didn't get absolutely run out of the Joel when they played Wake Forest, maybe Pitt's in the field. Or maybe if Pitt had beaten North Carolina in the ACC semifinal, maybe they get in it, with one of those first 4 spots. But I'm not sitting here arguing for them. My point has been from the beginning that we use the metrics to, I think, a disservice to the field. This is not about elevating the ACC. It's about elevating. There was no reason, as I said to Joe, there was no reason that TCU belonged in this field. There was nothing on their resume that said, we're an NCAA tournament team. They did nothing in the non-conference other than lose to Clemson and Nevada. They played. I think their best win was either Texas, Arlington, or Michigan, outside of the league.
Right.
And Texas Tech did nothing in the non-conference other than lose to Villanova and Butler, neither of whom made the field. But because they had good records inside their, not even great records, good records inside a conference that was propped up by the metrics, they looked better than they were.
No, I don't know. We're not. You're right. We don't need to go down this. The Texas Tech beat teams that are good.
I'm not arguing that. So did Wake and so did Pitt.
Right, but I just like
but the metrics of the teams that Wake and Pitt beat were not as good as the metrics which were elevated. BYU didn't do a damn thing outside the league. Their best win was it Utah? I don't know who BYU's State, right? That's their best win. So, but they're elevated. BYU was a top 15 net team, and that's how we group teams. Nobody can convince me. I want to talk about football. Actually, I want to talk about a lot of other things. I want to get your Tripletics on the Sweet 16.
My point was that the ACC, like, we can't work in reverse.
But I'm not doing that. I am not arguing for the ACC. I am simply arguing that the Big 12 completely elevated itself, whether it was strategy or not. We have to be able to look and say, why is this team? It's kind of odd that this team is thought to be the 8th best team in the country when they never were. And I'm talking about BYU here because they were in the top 10 for most of the season in the net, and they didn't drop that. Anyway, I'm done. But that was my point. My point is I'm not an idiot. There was no ACC teams that, other than the ones that got in, that deserved to be in based on what they accomplished. Zero. Mm-hmm. No other teams. I have no problem with the number of teams that got in. I mean, Virginia shouldn't have been there, and I wouldn't have cried if, they gave it to St. John's or Seton Hall or Providence. I don't know.
What I think is interesting is I think I want to investigate why is there a higher percentage of teams that advance to the Sweet 16 versus teams that get bids in the ACC than anywhere else. And to me, that comes down to playing style and the makeup of the conference. That you can do. You face about the same thing.
Or the teams are better than we think.
Well, I don't.
Clemson went to Alabama and ran them.
Yeah.
Beginning of the year, right? Beginning of the year. So, they did not have a great... I think the league is better than the metrics say. And again, not arguing that any of those teams belonged in the field. I think the league is better than the metrics say. And all you hear is when Clemson goes on the road and loses, or they lose at home to State, oh, what a terrible loss. Or when Clemson loses at Duke and John Rothstein, who deserved to have his credentials taken for this, oh, man, looks like the ACC might be a 2-bid league. Like, would you get out of here? I mean, when is losing at Duke? I mean, unless we're talking about 1996, all right? When is losing at Duke like a devastating thing? Anyway, can we move on?
I mean, it's so funny. As I've told you before, I wouldn't dare step on Jerry Palm's toes.
I love Jerry.
Bracketology is his world. Yeah. My primary responsibility during the regular season, like I was up in Stamford, Connecticut in studio for CBS Sports HQ over the first weekend. I'll be back for the Final Four. I'm doing a lot of stuff. Like I'm a much more like full-blown college basketball analyst at this point of the year. But when I start doing college basketball, I am doing it from the wagering angle. Do you know what I don't look at? Conference standings. You know what I don't look at? Bracketology. Like I see the full picture and the ratings and your offense, your defense, your injuries. Like I'm looking at it from that world. And so I'm probably a little bit more interested in why this performance keeps happening in the NCAA tournament than I am relitigating the bracketology commentary that was going on in college basketball in January and February, because I basically ignore all of that.
No, and I think we probably should. Very few leagues play.
Because you're sitting there talking about BYU, and I'm like, yeah, they shoot a lot of threes. When they go down, they're a top 10 team, and when they don't go down, they're a top 50 team. It's a live and die by the 3 team. Right. Like that is my hey, look, all insert coin, press vending machine, get chip opinion. Like that's exactly what I've got for BYU.
All right, let's dig into the Chipalytics. How do you look at Duke Houston? There's a promo that's been running for now 2 weeks or a week or whatever it is, where I said Duke and Houston, if Houston treats them like Tennessee treats them, I'm paraphrasing it, then Duke could be in trouble. But Houston also can be allergic to offense. And if that happens and they're not allowed to bully Duke, I think the Blue Devils will win the game. What do the Chipalytics say there?
Oh, Houston got a little bit banged up in that second round overtime thriller.
They did.
Starting to get their depth tested just a little bit. And do you know of the 16 teams remaining in the 2024 NCAA tournament who has the worst free throw percentage of all?
Is it Duke? Because Duke's not great at the line either.
No, that would be the Houston Cougars.
Ouch.
And do you know among the teams that are left in the NCAA tournament who is, I believe, last in offensive efficiency of teams that are left in the NCAA tournament?
Would that be the Houston Cougars?
No, they're not. They're 14th, but
okay.
low on the totem pole. You're right. I think that we've got a situation where the same way that Texas A&M forced Houston to play a game it did not want to play, Duke can do that, and Duke has better scores by an exponential margin. There is not a lot of defense that can withstand Jared McCain on a heater. I am not expecting Jared McCain to hit 8 3-pointers.
Yes.
But Jared McCain hits 4 or 5, and if they're timely, things could become problematic.
That's what I said earlier. Yeah.
Wildly impressed with the Duke Blue Devils. Like in general, I had a story that ran on Monday morning, re-ranking, reseeding the Sweet 16 based on what we saw. And I was down on Tennessee. I was down on Marquette. I was much higher on Purdue, and I was much higher on Duke. Like those are teams that I think if you're going to, obviously UConn, I mean, come on. But outside of UConn, when you want to start shuffling and you're trying to figure out who did enough to make a statement, I think the Duke Blue Devils are one of those top 3 teams that you got to say you're feeling a little bit better about their form right now, especially from where they were coming off regular season finale loss to North Carolina at home, NC State loss, 1 and done. Duke's not my pick to win it all from here, but can they beat Houston? Can they get to the Final Four? 100%.
Yeah, I actually, when I filled out my bracket, and I tweeted it out, so it's all out there in the ether. I'm not lying about this. When I filled out my bracket, I'm like, do I really want Duke in the championship game? But that's what I've got. I had Duke beating Creighton in one Final Four game, and Carolina beating UConn, which probably not going to happen. UConn is.
What, you want Carolina against Duke in your championship game?
I do. Yes. I have Carolina winning.
Somebody wants to rip a hole in the space-time continuum. We barely survived a semifinal. We barely survived.
Wait a second. We absolutely survived the semi, which was my point all along. It's not going to end the rivalry, and this won't end the rivalry either.
Actually, we all know Texas playing Texas A&M for a football national championship would rip a hole in the space-time continuum. We wouldn't be able to handle it. The sun gets bigger. We all get swallowed. I know.
But yeah, the draw looked to me, and if we get to, we're going to see Duke Houston. If Duke can survive, whether it's the physical play that's allowed or they get a break and the physical play is not allowed, the bullying is not allowed, then yeah, I think Duke will win that game. Real quick, you said you were down on Marquette. I love the way the Wolfpack have been playing. I actually wish this game was played yesterday and not Friday. I'd love to see the Wolfpack continuing to play on a regular basis, and the fact that they have to go all the way till Friday to play, I don't think works in their favor. But what do you like? I mean, Marquette's got multiple guys and multiple big guys that can play, that can shoot, which I think is going to be a little bit of a problem.
So Oso Ighodaro is the name to know. The 6'11" big man is like a versatile guy. He can step out, but that's not really his thing. He is more of a traditional big, and he had a matchup in the Colorado game in the second round against a guy named Eddie Lampkin. Now, Eddie Lampkin is not as big as DJ Burns, but I was wondering at the time whether or not that Ighodaro-Lampkin matchup was going to make things difficult for Colorado. And you know what? It wasn't. Lampkin was still a force inside, had a couple putback buckets, had a couple post-ups that resulted in baskets, and he was not played off the floor whatsoever. Cody Williams, KJ Simpson. I think if that game, the Colorado Marquette game, had gone 5 more minutes, I think Colorado could have won. And I think that it was the friskiness of the Buffs in that game that made me look at that NC State Marquette matchup and think, I think that NC State's especially right now, NC State's every bit as good as Colorado is. I mean, Colorado's a first 4 team, came out of the Pac-12. I like a lot of their pieces. They weren't consistent. Wow, that sounds like NC State. Like a lot of their pieces weren't all that consistent. And so I think this is going to be really tough for a Marquette team that they have had a lot of trouble getting over the hump. They so good, but just that little extra step sometimes isn't there. And so I think that the Wolfpack are a live dog for sure.
100%. I love the Wolfpack. I mean, I'm not even kidding. I will not at all be surprised if we've got 2 all-ACC regional finals. I will not be shocked.
I would be shocked if Clemson beats Arizona.
Oh, I won't. I think Arizona can beat themselves. I do.
We'll
I think they could beat themselves. But, I mean, that to me is the least likely of the wins. But I won't be shocked if that happens.
Yeah,
Caleb Williams is out. Caleb Love is out here with a 2 for 13 waiting. We know that. But if he gets to Carolina, that's going to be hell.
So I think that Arizona had to win in different ways in the second round, and that was a good thing for Arizona, because Clemson will do something similar. I always thought that Arizona was a sunny day sailor. When they can overwhelm you with pace, when they can overwhelm you with their 7-footers, then they're just really tough to stop. But if you can punch them in the face, then all of a sudden everything got discombobulated. That's how you end up losing to USC, a team that didn't even sniff the tournament at all. I think that Arizona having to win in different ways. They've got Keyshawn Johnson, who comes over from San Diego State. That's a guy who started in a national championship game last year. Caleb Love, as we know. They have added some pieces through the portal to this year's team. Jaden Bradley from Alabama, that's another one. I think that we saw Johnson, we saw Bradley, we saw players not named Caleb Love or Omar Ballo step up in that second-round win for the Wildcats. So I think their form is pretty sharp. I think Arizona's in the Elite Eight. I think they will play North Carolina in the Elite Eight.
That'll be so much fun.
And then I've got North Carolina winning that game.
All right, real quick. And this is back to, we didn't talk about they're going to beat Alabama. I'm not positive, because I'm not positive about anything. But as long as North Carolina brings their defense with them, I think North Carolina wins that game. And they cover, for those people who do care. Let me just ask you about this. because I know you guys have talked about it on the Cover 3 podcast, and Chip Patterson joins us every Wednesday. The Cover 3, I listen to it all the time. I'm curious as to do you guys, the four of you, and I know Bud's an attorney as well. Bud Elliott is part of the Cover 3 podcast group of four, super friends. Pardon. Is there any sense that either Florida State or Clemson's lawsuits really have merit?
Oh, we're divided now. With today's episode.
Did you address it on today's episode?
Oh, somebody popped off with a little side comment, and I didn't let it go. It was the conversation was about Troy Dannon left Washington to take the Nebraska athletic director job. This actually might be a good. And at his introductory press conference, he didn't say it as explicitly, but one thing he alluded to is that the financials are about to change. Yes. Washington is joining the Big Ten, but Washington is joining the Big Ten at a discounted rate. Mm-hmm. Did Troy Dannon run the numbers and say, we're not going to be able to take this? I think it was, I forgot which athletic director said it, but the estimation is that it's a $20 million payroll. That you need to set aside $20 million of your athletic department budget to be prepared to compensate your football roster as employees. And those numbers and that game, but somebody, I'll let you listen to it, argued is like, and maybe that's why Florida State and Clemson are looking to get out, this, that, or the other. To which I pushed back on a few other things, including the idea that, it's going to all work out. I am suspect of anybody who gives analysis on these lawsuits right now. I am suspect of the narrative that the ACC should settle.
No, I wouldn't settle if I were them.
I'm suspect of the narrative that the ACC should settle, get the money, keep the league together, use it to fix some money problems, and go ahead and play it on the future. Because the way that narrative is being spun is that, well, if you don't do that, you're going to end up getting Pac-12'd. I'm suspect of that. I'm suspect of the narrative that Florida State has a solid legal argument.
Oh, I don't think Florida State nor Clemson have solid legal arguments. I think everything I have read about their claims, they're all specious to me. I think they're all designed to get a settlement. And I think if the ACC settles, the number will be amenable to just about every school who really wants out. I think settling is the end of the league. I've always felt that. And if the ACC wants to settle, we're settling at the full freight. Want out? Here's what it costs. If you're not willing to pay that, then you're in, and you're just going to have to suck it up until the entire ecosystem crumbles, which is going to happen anyway.
I think there are two entities that could decide this, and I think it's the University of North Carolina and ESPN. Mm-hmm. I think if they want to, all right, this is it. I think that those are the two places that decide, and I don't know all about the look in and the 2027 but you got to make the decision in 2025. Are we going to extend it or not extend it? There's a side that says ESPN doesn't want Discovery. ESPN doesn't want to take this to trial. And, there's a side that's like, oh, watch out for the skeletons in the closet. Raycom.
Those are all from Florida State and Clemson people.
I have become so suspect of any analysis being free from bias on any side of it that I emotionally do not care. I will functionally still talk about it as much as I need to.
I will.
Within the context of...
I don't care what league these guys are in.
Being in a Cover 3 podcast, host, but I just don't feel like anybody's being honest at this point in the proceedings.
Yeah, just looking at the merits, I'm like, man, you guys willingly signed it. Like, what are you arguing about?
That was the other thing is like, okay, so you signed it and you signed the contract and you benefited from the contract.
Right.
You didn't benefit from the contract as much as you maybe would have liked or now feel like you deserve, but functionally the contract was executed because
what's the leverage? What is Florida State and Clemson's leverage? What, are they going to not play football? Like, I'm sorry, you're in the league. You're in the league until the league ends, until the contract ends, whenever that is. What, are they going to not play? Are they just going to take their football and go home? I don't. I'm not saying both that the ACC has leverage, but this is the deal. And I think if you settle, the league ends. That's what I've always believed. If you settle and then the number is not massive, I think the league's over. That's the way I've always looked from the beginning. That's the way I looked at it. When Florida State brought the lawsuit, or ACC sued first, I know, but when Florida State sued the league, that was my position then. It is my position now. It doesn't matter. The ACC can't settle. And I don't think it matters where they go to court. I really don't.
I'm not ready to go that far because I haven't thought about this the same way the entire time. And that's why I'm distrusting of everyone, and I just don't care. I don't know, man. Like I was saying about the college basketball, I don't look at the sport that way right now. And I understand there's a lot of fans who really, really care about it and, feel very saddened by sort of where we are in this whole process. But I think that there's a lot of tough decisions to be made across the ACC, and there's a lot of panicky schools that could do just as much damage as Florida State and Clemson. You get Florida State, get Clemson, get one or two others, you get one or two others.
I mean, if the entire league sued, if every school in the league sued the ACC, that would be a problem.
Then yeah, I don't know.
I know. You just talked me into that. Like, that's the way you blow it up if everybody is suing the league. And then Jim Phillips just takes buyout fees from everybody, and he goes and buys, Crete, somewhere in the Mediterranean, and just owns the whole island.
And back to the Pac-12 part of this, presidents got on a call thinking they were about to agree to a deal.
Right. That's right. With Apple, that was a real thing that was about to happen.
University presidents logged into a Zoom and we're like, okay, we've reviewed everything. We're going to do it. Hey, just got an update. Oregon and Washington aren't joining the Zoom. Oh, they're not joining the Zoom? Why? Are they having internet problems? No, they're actually joining the Big Ten. And that's how quickly these things might change.
Right.
So I don't know. Anything is possible.
Chip Patterson is the best, man. Fastest segment in radio. All right, my man. I'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Y'all be well.